So Nahum is very short, just a couple chapters, not much to it, and yet it's also very troubling. So as you read this and listen to it, the sort of thing that jumps out to you immediately is that it seems to sort of celebrate this idea that God is vengeful over his people, over the destruction of those who are God's enemies. So, in other words, if God's enemies are the Assyrians, which is what's communicated here, then when the Assyrians are destroyed, there's like this vengeful portrayal of God, and that's kind of celebrated. And it kind of hits you a little funny, to be honest. And it's rejoicing in the destruction of Nineveh, which was the Assyrian capital in 612 BC. Um, Now, you might say, hang on a second, we just read Jonah, and didn't Jonah say that Nineveh repented? And I think that's further points to, and I said this in the Jonah video, further points to this idea that Jonah is kind of an allegory. The story is not historical; it's a parable, and whereas Nahum is probably more historical. So we get this vengeful picture of God in Nahum, and we got to ask, how does this make it in the Bible? And how do we use it? And the Nahum's message originally appears to be sort of like gloating about violence brought upon Nineveh by God, but on a closer look, the message is more like this: um, Look what happened to Nineveh, God's enemy. If you, Judah, God's people, don't turn away from sin and toward God, then that'll happen to you too. And so maybe it's not so much gloating, but more just sort of foreboding, warning, um, which we see a fair amount, especially in the prophets, but really in Nahum, it's quite forceful. So the name Nahum means consolation, actually, and you think consolation? That doesn't make any sense. Maybe the consolation is like this: the enemy of God cannot destroy God's people. Maybe that's the consolation. But on the other hand, if God's people, we turn away from God and trust in ourselves, then we're risking mortal danger to ourselves because we are calling ourselves God's enemy. If we are actively working against God's ways and God's purposes, then we are God's enemy. So Nahum's a tough one, but there it finds itself in the middle of the minor prophets.